Today, we're installing a floor pan. Installation of the passenger side floor pan is pretty straightforward. I originally cut out the floor pan when I was replacing the torque box. This gave me all the room I needed to get the torque box installed correctly. Fitting the floor pan itself is a matter of carefully trimming the replacement part to make sure the gaps between the panels are as small as possible. I used an old battery to hold down the floor so that I could mark the pan as to where it needed to be trimmed. Once this was all trimmed up, I drilled the holes along the flange for plug welds. Next, I scuffed up the panel to prepare it for a coat of zero rust. The edges and flanges were masked off to make for a better welding surface. Here is that pan after I painted it and removed the masking tape. Next, I clamped the floor pan in place with butt weld clamps and vice grips. Once I was happy with its position, I used self-tapping screws on the panels that overlap. Many adjustments need to be made to get the fitment just right. The floor pan is clamped in place. I have zip screws across the front and all the edges are cleaned up and lined up pretty well. And we're going to start tacking this into place. I used a painter's tool to align the edges of the butt weld just right before putting my first tacks into place. I repeat this process, removing the clamps as I go, ensuring that the edges remain aligned. The passenger side floor pan is mostly tacked in right now. The plug welds are done across the front. I had to make a few relief cuts. I had to make a relief cut here so that this surface would match this surface. I made a relief cut here earlier. I had to make another relief cut here so that that would sit flat. At this point, I go through and stitch weld the rest of the joints, trying to minimize distortion by moving around as much as possible. And of course, after welding, we have to grind our welds flat. We are very nearly done with welding in our floor pan, with the exception of this rather conspicuous hole right here. We're going to take care of that, but first we need to start with a cardboard template. I've made a cardboard template that'll help me make a patch panel to cover up this rusted out hole. I made it into 3 pieces because I'm not exactly sure how much of this I'm going to need. From this side, you don't get a good perspective of where the rust stops. This looks like solid metal from this side, but when you get underneath, you can see here, the rust goes up to here, so I'm going to cut it out from this side to save as much metal as possible. With the first piece of the patch fitted and clamped in place, we're ready to start welding. I made cardboard templates for the remaining patches and cut them from sheet metal. I used magnets to hold the patch pieces in place before welding them up. And then ground the welds flat. So there you have it, the finished product of our passenger side floor pan installation and repair.